Hello and welcome to Film Slam Stream's post-film conversation for El Carrito. My name is Eric Siler, and I'm an instructor of film, media arts, and communications, as well as moderator for this conversation. We're very pleased to be joined by the director of El Carrito, Zahida Pirani. Hello, Zahida, and welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It is so good to have you, and I can't wait to talk to you about this film. But before we do that, we may have some students who are studying Spanish joining us. Can you give them a special greeting in Spanish?
Sure, hola, mi nombre es Zaida, yo soy la directora de la película El Carrito. Ojalá que ustedes van a gustar la película y que si puedo dar un poco de consejo de mi experiencia, me encantaría.
Well, thank you for that greeting. I know our students appreciate that are studying Spanish. So this film is a very interesting film. I know you're a full-time filmmaker. You're also a student at UCLA. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind creating this film.
Yeah, so for me, before I started doing narrative film, I did some documentary film, and I did this documentary short about a street vendor named Judith, and I would follow her around and just take footage. And a big preoccupation she always had is her cart getting stolen. And so that was, and one of my favorite films is Bicycle Thieves. And so I kind of put that together and I thought, well, what if we did a modern day retelling of Bicycle Thieves about the immigrant experience and also made the street vendor very untrusting. What would she do if she sees that cart as her American dream and something happens to it? And so that's where the idea came from. And I remember Judith just always being preoccupied, like, where's my cart? Did we lock up the cart? And as you'll see in the film, it's just basically an embellished version of a shopping cart, but it's still very, very important to street vendors for their livelihood.
Now, did you see the cart as a symbol? What do you think the cart symbolize in this film in particular?
Yeah, I mean, the cart is definitely a symbol and it definitely is a character in the film, both carts actually. And for me, the new cart, the sort of cart that she, decides to spend a lot of her savings on is for her a way to the American dream. So for me, the cart sort of represents that pathway to the American dream. And what I wanted to do is explore what happens if we take that card out and we're dealing with somebody who's very interesting, who has fully embraced sort of this individualistic mode of operating in the world and is very alone. What happens if we take that away? How does she react? And really, she lashes out against the street vendor community. And so I wanted to explore that. And in the end, this film is really about human connection and community and building that. And so for her, you know, and with the cart, I sort of wanted to move beyond the immigrant narrative of the American dream. A lot of the stories we see out there is about immigrants pursuing the American dream. And I think, this idea of community and connection and sort of relying on each other to thrive in this society is something also is a contribution of immigrants as well. And so that was something I wanted to explore here. And the both carts definitely have their own characters. So they have their own sounds. And we did that a lot through sound design. It's like each cart has their own sound, and they're given prominence. And, the other cart for me, our opening shot is the wheel, the broken wheel in the cart. And for me, that represented sort of Nellie, the main character herself, sort of just going through the motions and pushing along, even though she's like about to break. And she eventually does break in the movie. And so that was the idea, that was the symbolism behind the cart and some of the visuals around the cart.
I'm glad you pointed that out about the giving the card each its own sound, and especially I like the scene when she was about to realize the cart was going to be stolen. A lot of directors would use like music to try to heighten it, and you have the audience react to, oh, something's going to happen, whether someone's going to attack her or something. But just the way you shot it and the elements of the natural sound, I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but we knew something was going to happen. But consciously using the natural sound in that scene, just continued to exhibit what you did throughout the rest of the film. So I thought that was well done.
Thank you. No, thank you for noticing that because that was a big part of the vision is that we wanted the sounds of New York to be our score. So that's how we approached it. And for me, it's like you get a feeling that something might happen because we actually intentionally brought in car alarms or we'll bring in an ambulance and that will give a sense of like something's going to happen here. And so we do that and I love it because sound design is like half of the filmmaking experience. So thank you for that because yeah, we worked hard on the sound.
Well, you're welcome. Another element that I noticed, I liked how you said the card had its own personality, but each character had their own personality. But you intentionally created a relationship between the daughter and the father, in which she was almost, I guess, mothering him in a way, and there was a little contention there. Tell us a little bit more about how you created those two characters and why you created the situation between them.
Yeah, for me, I wanted to give people insight, of Nellie's personal life and how it wasn't just about her as a street vendor and her harshness, yes, comes from that harsh life, but it's also that her personal life, she's got so many things going on. And, in terms of inspiration, another inspiration for this film is all the immigrant women I've grown up with. I grew up in a low income immigrant family and community, and um, the women were doing everything. They are the primary breadwinners. They're the primary caretakers. They're even the ones most involved in the community. And so I wanted to show that other element. I think also what I like about Rico, who's the dad, is he brings some light into her life, some lightness. And so one of the first times we actually see her smile is with her father. And so I wanted to definitely portray that she's his caretaker, but that he is also, he's not just a burden to her. They also have a loving relationship, and he's probably the only person in her life who she connects with. But even then, even with that relationship, it's like she's very independent, very much, I want to do this alone. And everyone and everything around her becomes a burden. So that was the idea behind that relationship.
Another thing you did was it was obvious, a sense of culture. Can you tell us a little bit about the cultural elements that you put into this film? Even though this was shot here in New York, you're talking about someone who's trying to make a living as a vendor, but still maintains a sense of identity and culture. What are some of the intentional elements you put in this film to make us aware of that?
And Eric, when you say culture, what aspects do you mean?
Of the culture that the family represented it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so the family in this film is Mexican, and they are immigrants from Mexico. And so, yeah, that was a very important part. I think in my mind, Nelly is very Catholic as well. And so you see some of those symbols. And yeah, I think really bringing, for example, like one way that we did that was everything we shot was on location. We didn't shoot in sound stages. So her home, and the home that you see that they live in is actually like a local community person's home. We didn't have to do much production design because that's their home. And so what I always strive to do is stay very real. So I have a very naturalistic way of my style is very a naturalism style. And one of the ways I do that is by shooting on location, shooting in the neighborhoods. And some of the actors also are non-actors. So you'll see that like some of the street vendors are actual street vendors. So we actually collaborated with street vendors. And I think that's a big part of the culture too, is the street vending culture is really represented, I think, in a real way. And that's because I had people who were on set who are street vendors who had never been on a film set before. So I think all those little details add a lot to the specificity of culture and place and yeah, all of that.
So the cast. Let's switch more to the production side of this. Yeah, I know it took 6 days to shoot this film. The actors. Where did you find the actors?
Yeah, so I worked with an amazing casting director, Emily Fleischer, here in New York. And so she found me a lot of the main characters, so the protagonist Nellie and the father Rico and the rival vendor Idalia. So that's how I found them, is through an amazing casting director here in New York. And then other parts we casted as non-actors. So for example, um, the place where she buys the cart is actually a bike shop just a few blocks from where I live. And I was, auditioning some actors for the role of the guy who sells her the cart, and none of them seemed quite right. And I was working, and Eduardo is a non-actor, so he actually works in that bike shop. That's his workshop. And so I just couldn't help but think like he's perfect. Like he's such a I mean, he has to deal with customers all the time, and he just has that New York attitude of no nonsense. And I was like, he's perfect. So and I just didn't feel like the auditions were giving me someone who was felt right for the part. And so I asked him and we did like a sort of audition and he was great. So that's an example of like how I like to mix actors and non-actors. And then as I mentioned, some of the street vendors are also non-actors.
We had some students that are watching who are potential filmmakers or current filmmakers. Tell us a little bit about the process of actually shooting in New York. How did
Mm.
you secure permits? Did you block up the streets? What was the procedure like?
Uh, well, shooting in New York can be really great in some ways, and because I've shot in LA and I've shot in New York, and I think New York it can be really great in some ways and in other ways challenging. The way that it's really great is that the permitting isn't that difficult. So my producers handled a lot of that, the permitting and all of that, and it's relatively like I think in New York City they want you to shoot in New York. And so it's not as expensive. The big challenge is what you were kind of alluding to, which is just a lot of people in the streets, especially where I shot. We have a very large population in this area, and um, getting people in the frame is something you sometimes can't control. And so the a way I approached it was because it's such a realism way of doing things. I was like, this is part of the world, this is part of the life, and we did not block people out. That just didn't make sense for us. um we let people pass by, and I think because I have a documentary background, we kind of approached it as if we're doing a documentary narrative hybrid. So, and my DP also has a lot of documentary experience, and so I think it was a gift in some ways because there were moments we captured that were not scripted that you see in the film that were actually spontaneous. And for example, I'll just give you an example. There's the scene where she's selling the tacos from her new cart, and it's supposed to be like her high moment. She's really happy. And the way I had written it in the script is like people are swarming around her. But we didn't have the background actors. We just didn't get to that. So we didn't have the background actors for that scene. So somebody in my team said, why don't we sell? Because those were real tacos that one of the street vendors had made. So one of my team members said, why don't we have her sell those tacos in the plaza for just $1 a plate instead of the regular $5? And I was like, yes. And so that crowd that you see in that scene is actually real people in the plaza who think she's an actual street vendor selling tacos for like a discounted rate. And so those are some ways that we kind of leaned into the sort of a lot of people and like the documentary approach. Yeah, that's one way we dealt with that.
Oh, that's a very fascinating behind the scenes look. Uh, Tell me about a challenging day on the set or a challenging scene. I think it is, maybe I'm wrong, was the scene when the police were coming and all the
Mm,
vendors were scattering and so
mhm.
forth. And I can, just from my expertise in screening a lot of films, I knew there was a few different takes,
Oh yeah.
edited together. Was that scene the most challenging, or was there another
Oh
scene that was
gosh. I
challenging?
don't know I mean, every day has their challenges in production. But yeah, that was definitely, yeah. I mean, the first 2 days we shot in the plaza. And this was a completely new team. I had never worked with that DP. I had never worked with these producers before. And so going into such a crowded place and such a huge, vast area was a challenge. Our first 2 days because we didn't get time yet to get to know each other and how we each work. And so yeah, I would say the shots in the plaza were tough because that's like a lot of communicating across the plaza. How are you doing that? How are you making sure people aren't looking directly in the camera so you can use the shot? And then there's like a lot of movement. So it was a run and gun scene. So yeah, I would say that was one of I think the first day or two, the first day was probably the hardest because we shot those scenes. Yeah, but every day has their challenges, you know? I mean, the scene where she finds out her card is stolen, we shot that as a oneer. I don't know if people noticed it, but we never cut. So that is like one continuous shot from the moment she steps out and sees her card is gone until the end of that scene. So that was another challenge because that was something I really wanted is to do it as a oneer. And we did that like maybe 15 times, 16 times. And at one point I was like, let's keep going. And at one point the lights of the liquor store went out, which is one of our big lighting. It gave us a lot of light. So we're like, okay, we can't keep going. But luckily we had what we needed. So there were some challenges, but it was so much fun. It was a lot of fun shooting this film.
I bet it looked like it was a lot of fun. Just a couple more questions as we wrap up here. Uh, Getting back to more of the content, who would you consider is the antagonist in the film?
Um, I think in Nellie's mind, the antagonist is the rival vendor, but I think the real antagonist is the society and sort of the
Hmm.
system within which these women have to live and work. And so in Nellie's mind, it is that rival vendor. And that's kind of the point of the film too, is she kind of goes after that vendor when in reality it's not that vendor, it's the circumstances and it's the system within which they function. And so there is a critique of late stage capitalism for sure, because these women are trying to just do something and the odds are against them. The police are coming after them, or they're worried about their families, or they're trying to get that spot, and it's really not about pointing the finger at each other. In the end, it's about coming together and supporting each other through those hard times.
Absolutely. And what's next for you? I know you're at UCLA Film School. Are you working on a thesis film right now? What can we
Yes.
expect to see from you in the near future?
Yeah, I'm actually working on another short film, which I plan on shooting this summer, and in New York. And it's about two Bangladeshi restaurant workers, one who mentors the other. And it has some of some similar themes as El Carrito. So that's what I'm working on like immediately next. And then I also have a feature film that I'm writing right now. So I have a couple of projects in the pipeline.
Wonderful. We really look forward to seeing your work in the future, especially if it's anything like El Carrito. Well,
Thank
Zahida Pirani, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. I wish you all the best and much luck and much success in everything you do. Do you mind
Thank
saying goodbye to our Spanish-speaking students?
Sure, gracias por tenerme. Me alegro que ustedes han participado y ojalá que nos vemos en el futuro.
Well, and thank you for that. And thank you to our audience for joining us for this important and invigorating conversation. For more information about upcoming Cleveland International Film Festival events, please visit clevelandfilm.org. I'm Eric Siler. Thank you.